Seriously, Bud is brought to you by OmniSend. OmniSend is a top choice for email and SMS marketing on WordPress, perfect for WooCommerce shops. Easily connect with customers and send out awesome campaigns every day. Hello, my name is Bree, and welcome to Seriously, Bud, a podcast featuring an unexpected conversation with someone in the WordPress community. And now it's time for my dad, Bud Kraus.
Thank you, Bree. You know, I had so much fun last week speaking with Mike Auteri. I thought I'd do this all over again. Now, I'll be back at the end to give you my thoughts about this week's episode. It's number 35. So here we go. Katie Keith, welcome to Seriously, Bud. You met your husband at Sheffield University. You guys were living in the same dorm?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
right. We were in the same student hall. So we were living together exactly when we met.
Wow. Yeah. So was it like love at first sight? I'm always interested in that.
I did have a boyfriend, but sort of. We were best friends first for like the first term. Lots of alcohol was involved, and yes.
Okay.
Did you start with that?
Well, because I like that kind of. You're not supposed to ask me questions. I guess it's okay, but because I thought that was really cool. You know, here you guys are like shacking up already, like right out of college.
Yeah, it really eased the transition actually, because in the second year after we left halls, we lived in a shared house with 4 other guys, so him and 3 of our male friends. You can see I'm in the right place in the WordPress community, with most of people being male. I think lived in a house with 4 guys as students.
You know, it's funny. Why am I not in a community of just all women? Yeah, I just realized I never thought of that. When you went to school, what did you study?
I studied English and philosophy, so not directly relevant to what I do now.
Yeah, but what about your husband?
He did
what was
computer
studying?
science, so that is the tech link.
So when you got out of school, though, you said, okay, I'm going to be a philosophy professor.
I never knew what I wanted to be, and that's really hard. There's a lot of judgment on people in society that don't know. My mum is a doctor, and my sister, who's a bit younger than me, always wanted to be a doctor. So it was like there was something wrong with me. I was motivated, I got good grades, but I never had a specific career goal.
You know, in the United States, we have a career for people like you, which I was one, because when I graduated college, I had no idea. There was obviously no internet. So there's an industry, it's called insurance, you know, because if you don't know what you're going to do, we're going to put you in the insurance industry.
Okay.
So that's where I was for waiting for the internet to be invented. And then once I saw its invention, I knew that's where I wanted to go into computer-mediated communications, that kind of thing. But what did you do?
I applied for jobs that vaguely felt like they required skills that I had, which was mainly things like research and writing. With English and philosophy, it's about the transferable skills, which is the research and the writing and the analysis. I was applying for things like research jobs, even like personal assistant type jobs. And the first job I ended up getting was a technical writer at a software company, which basically means writing help pages.
Yes. When you graduated, did you get married right away?
We got married 5 years after we graduated. So we'd been together 8 years when we got married. But we're from different sides of the country. I traveled quite a long way for university, whereas he went more locally. Our families are about 6 hours apart. England's a small country, not like your country, with thousands of miles apart. Yeah. But when he visited me in the holidays while we were students, he was just amazed by how nice where I lived was, because I was from a coastal town, always much more countryside around, whereas he was from a big ex-industrial city. It was very clear to him that he wanted to move down my way near my family after we graduated, which meant there was no arguments about where we both live or whether we'd end up in the same place or anything like that.
Well, did he get a job right out of school because he's in computer science?
Yeah, not bad. It was scary at the time because he'd moved so far to be with me, but it only took about 2 months when you look back at it. And he got 2 job offers as a software developer and accepted one of those. Both of them were public sector software. So, because in my part of the country, the southwest of England, it's very much kind of public sector where the best jobs are. He ended up being a software developer at the land registry, and he worked his way up there a bit, eventually becoming a senior developer.
You mentioned your mother before, and she's a
retired
doctor
now, but yes.
She was a doctor. Okay. So what did she...
She was a
doctor?
general practitioner, so everything, the family doctor type thing.
And your father?
TV producer, director.
Hey there, we're going to get back to my conversation with Katie and learn more about her producer, director, father in just one moment. What's a great way to find out who's in the WP world? Well, go to the WP.world to find out and let others know what you're up to, too. That's the WP.world.
He kind of, you know, the BBC, everyone knows the BBC, don't they? It's, not just UK.
We've heard
So
of
he
it.
was with the BBC,
Right.
which was at the time, or sort of public sector broadcasting, but not really. That's complicated. But anyway, so he was with them for decades. And then when I was a teenager, he went independent and he kind of formed his own production companies and was mainly making local TV. He ended up working for me in my 3rd job, which was interesting for a while as well. But I don't know if you want to get to my 3rd job in order.
Yes, it's okay if we're going to go there. So, yes, here we go. We could do WordPress.
Well, this is pre-WordPress. I had still pre-WordPress.
Oh, pre-WordPress. Oh, okay.
So job
All right,
number
let's
1 was the technical writing, which I hated. It was so boring. And I was really upset. I remember crying on my first day after work because I was like, is this what a career is like? This was the most boring day of my life. I stayed there 5 months and then I applied for other jobs and I got quite a cool job for a local magnetherapy company. So magnetherapy is magnetic bracelets that allegedly help with things like arthritis. I'm not allowed to.
I mean, it doesn't work? Is that what you're saying?
I never formed an opinion about that. I worked there for, 2 years or something. But I never decided if I believed in it because a lot of the people that we work with passionately believed in it, but the scientific evidence is not there. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I really liked that job because it was a small company and it allowed me to kind of evolve the job in the way that fit me, which was really nice. And I've done that in my career ever since, which is why I mention it, kind of molding what I do around my skills and interests. It kind of evolved into a kind of marketing project management type role, quite similar to what I do now in my own business in many ways, but they wouldn't increase my salary as my responsibilities increased. So I left there and got a job in the public sector, this time for fostering and adoption. So my job was a marketing job in the fostering and adoption teams, basically doing advertising campaigns to find families for children who didn't have a family. Well, that was my longest job.
Well, wait a minute. Where does your father fit into working for you?
Yes, and that
right?
was that
you did
role.
Say
so
that.
we've reached that point now. So with that job, it was quite controversial within the team, and they did that on purpose. They created a marketing role within a social work team because I would bring different things to the table. The social workers were all about sensitivity and confidentiality, and they didn't want to really advertise children. That put a bad taste in their mouths, and children shouldn't be advertised. But these kids needed families. Their parents weren't able to look after them. Right. And so the management decided to create this role where I would do adverts, sometimes general adverts. But the most controversial thing was when we had a specific child that was what we called hard to place, which means nobody wants to adopt them, basically, because either special needs or more commonly their age. If they're more than about 5 years old, people don't want to adopt them just because they want a baby or something. And that is where my dad came in. Because as a TV producer who was kind of towards the tail end of his career, he was just doing a few local shows at that point. He needed work. And I was doing a project to see what would happen if we produced videos of actual children. And then we would show these videos to approved adoptive parents. who had been through the system and were looking for a child. And so the idea was that by bringing the child to life on video, instead of just showing a written profile or photo, people would kind of bond with the child because they're not allowed to meet them typically until they've already made the decision. And so my dad got the contract and I ended up working with him so that he could make the videos of these children.
What a great idea to show people, I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe acquaint people with adopting parents, what their child is like, or, that's the whole purpose of this. Help me out here.
I
I'm
won't
drowning.
take full credit.
I'm drowning on my own show,
I won't
Katie.
take credit because others were trying it at the same time. But overall, it was a new thing and it hadn't been done in my city, Plymouth, before. And my team did not like it. We had some heated discussions at team meeting and they were like, it shouldn't be about what the child looks like. But the reality is people need to make an emotional connection. And when they read about a child and all their problems and behavior issues, then it can put them off. They need to be able to understand that. And those are real issues that they have to be able to cope with. But at the same time, you need both. So the emotional issue often takes them to that next step. And then they think, can we cope with those issues?
Now, do you happen to know Mark Benzakane?
No.
Oh, then after this is over, you have to go to my episode, Mark Benzakane. His whole life has been dedicated to foster children. He has adopted like 8 or 9 or 10, or I don't know. The WordPress community years ago helped build an extension to his home in Milwaukee, if I got it right. It's where all his children live. Now, he lives in Northern California now. I will send you a link to his episode.
That sounds interesting.
I'm surprised that you guys, whatever. I mean, obviously you're not in this field anymore. What happened after this?
After that, well, all through our 20s, actually, Andy and I talked about that we wanted to start a business. Our jobs were all right. He liked his less than I liked mine by then. He was particularly getting frustrated with the rigidity of doing software for local government. He wasn't able to use the latest technologies. He didn't have a lot of technical freedom. And there was the whole slowness of working within a large organization. And I was struggling with the slowness as well, that my personality didn't quite fit with the sort of organization I was working in. For example, if I wanted to recruit foster carers, sometimes there was no point in me even advertising because of the shortage of social workers and how slow it took to recruit them and all of that. So there were bottlenecks outside of my control, which made it less motivating to do my job well, actually, because there was no point. Well, Andy ended up quitting his job because he was more unhappy than me. So he started a web design business, which I helped alongside my full-time job. So I was supporting us financially at that point.
But give me a year, like a time period here. So
at the very end of 2009, he quit his job. And then it was early 2010 that we were setting up the web design business. So we were living on a strict budget then and living on my salary. And he was doing the coding and custom themes, that kind of thing. It wasn't his background, but we realized that to be a kind of formal software developer, he was a Java developer, he'd need to do things like contracting for large organizations. And we wanted a more small, flexible business. So we thought, okay, let's learn web design. And then I can do the online marketing and the copywriting. He could do the technical stuff. So between us, there's a low barrier to entry to that type of work. We can get straight into it with no investment. And also it is a good balance of our respective skills.
When did it become, or you started moving into the plugin development area? Now, before you answer that question, I just want to say to our listener, I'm assuming there's going to be one listener here, that WordPress, I always like to say, is a software that allows people to make websites. And a plugin, which we're about to discuss, I think we are anyway, is an extension to WordPress. It's much like an app is to a cell phone. And you were starting to develop plugins. Am I right about that?
So first of all, we were a web agency. Well, first of all, it was just us. And we advertised ourselves as doing business websites for small local businesses. We did websites for a local carpenter, a washing machine repair shop, which amazingly is still online today, 14 years later, and things like that, quite small scale. And then within a year, we kind of discovered that advertising ourselves as WordPress specialists would pay off. It would get us much more high value projects than just going for small business web design. So we started doing things like Google AdWords for WordPress keywords. And that was kind of what catapulted us into WordPress specialists. But it was still just services, and that lasted until 2016, by which time we kind of grown as much as we could. We were hiring freelancers by then, but we didn't really want to build a kind of agency with in-house staff. And I was really struggling to find project managers. So that meant that I was managing all the projects, even if we had other developers and things providing capacity. I was the limit. I was the ceiling on how many projects we could have at once because I was the only project manager. So we thought, okay, how can we grow the business beyond this in a way that we will actually enjoy? And what we decided was the solution was to go into WordPress products. And we decided on plugins rather than themes because a plugin can be as big or as small as you want. And we were also kind of scared of themes because a theme touches every part of the website, certainly the front end. So we thought, the support is going to be terrible with themes because people will just blame everything on the theme. And we felt that given our resources, plugins would be more realistic.
And then we're going to jump ahead a little bit because I don't want to do too much of this, but at a certain point, you sold the business.
So I've sold 5 plugins, if that's what you mean.
Oh, 5 plugins. Yeah. See, I told you I don't know you and your business. I just proved it, okay? So 5 of, I guess, your most successful or
the
your
worst
best plugins were sold. The worst ones were sold.
I was very clear about this.
Don't worry, nobody's
I
listening
told the
anyway.
buyers,
So,
these are our lowest selling plugins. This is why we are selling them, because we want to focus on the ones that are working. Yeah, so I did a big 80-20 rule analysis on the business, like maybe late last year, and identified that, as with everything, most of our sales are coming from a small number of plugins. I decided to sell the 5 of the 6 worst ones, I suppose, and did a tweet saying, how would you go about selling some plugins? Well, that got me a buyer, just that tweet. And it was a really good buyer as well. The founders of Skyverge, who are hugely successful, and they sold to GoDaddy and have recently left to start their own business.
Yeah.
So they were a great buyer that I knew I could trust with our customers. I was very clear to them that these are our lowest selling plugins, but they had a different business model to us. They were kind of creating more of a plugin shop, that they wanted a whole range of lots and lots of different plugins to kind of build a comprehensive offering. Whereas I was doing the opposite and focusing on a smaller number, still have 19, but a smaller number of the most successful plugins. That was why they were happy, and I didn't mislead them or anything.
I was told that you have this fascination with data.
Yeah, I'd say not very good at it, but when I get data, I like to understand things using it.
All right, what does that mean?
Well, with business, you can do a lot based on instincts, but there'll always be some point that you've missed. For example, let's take Black Friday, since that's coming up soon. The easy, busy work is to submit your Black Friday discounts to dozens and dozens of Black Friday roundup articles, like top 50 best Black Friday deals. That could be all your Black Friday marketing. And you see so many of these articles, you receive so many emails about them. Without data, you'll think that's a good opportunity. And we used to do that. And then we started looking at where our Black Friday sales were coming from using things like Google Analytics. And we realized that our sales were coming from people coming directly to our websites, finding us directly in search engines, and even more so our own email list. And almost none, maybe one sale of the whole Black Friday campaign might come from a roundup. So only data will tell you that that is just useless, busy work.
Right. So that's basically your interest in data is useful information, or can be
yes,
useful information.
Yes, the same as selling the lowest selling plugins. To focus on the best one, you need to know what the best ones are to see that potential and therefore improve profitability.
Here's the question I'm dying to ask you, which is, and I think I asked you this already when I met you in person, but Mallorca, Spain, How did you get to Mallorca, Spain, which is where you are right now?
We're from England, as you all have gathered by now, and we built this super flexible business where we could live anywhere and it wouldn't affect our work. We have a team now of about 20 people, and that is based all over the world. We think we've got one person in England. We've got people in America, Asia, Europe, all over the place. It truly is global. And yet we were still living somewhere where it rains all the time. It wasn't really an adventure.
Yeah.
And we'd ideally like to travel and spend a few months in different places and do kind of the digital nomad thing that lots of WordPress people do because of their flexibility. But we have a child in school and she needs more stability than that. So we thought, well, what can we do? For a while, we were talking quite negatively, like, oh, when she's 18, we'll travel. And then we thought, well, no, what can we do now? Because this is just depressing. We thought, well, what we can do is move somewhere for a year. That would be a school academic year, put her in an international school that speaks English, so she won't be totally lost. And Mallorca was the right place for that because one, Mallorca has a lot of international British schools and they even follow the British curriculum that she was already familiar with. And all the teachers, except the Spanish teachers, are British, and it felt like home. And also, Andy had always had this dream to have a second home in Mallorca because we'd been on holidays there and he particularly made a connection with it. I liked it, but he had more of an emotional connection. We thought, okay, let's move to Mallorca for a year. And that was 3 years ago.
Now, why the connection between the UK, England, I suppose, and Mallorca?
It's just tourism. In the 70s, there were a lot of cheap flights from England to Mallorca and it became a thing. So I thought that all the expats would be English and we'd meet Spanish people. Actually, it's all Germans. And I didn't realize this, that Germany has a much stronger link with Mallorca than England. And English people don't hear about this, but more of the tourists and expats seem to be German, particularly in the area where I live. And apparently it's just a thing that German people come to Mallorca, which is fine. It's just that I didn't come here planning to speak German and I don't speak German. I'm working really hard on my Spanish, so it's kind of frustrating that people just want to speak to me in English or they're German.
Do you happen to know Sabrina Zayden by any chance? She moved from Ukraine to Spain and is working on her Spanish right now.
No.
Well, that's another episode you have to listen to.
I know that a lot of Ukrainians have moved to Spain. Well, they've moved all over Europe after the war, but in my daughter's school, there's certainly quite a few Ukrainians that moved over when the war broke out.
Tell me about Mallorca. It sounds like it's beautiful and it's mountainous and it's food and the whole bit. Give me a little Rick Steves tour of Mallorca, if you know who he is.
Yeah, it's a Spanish island. It takes about just over an hour to get from one end to the other. So it's not tiny, but it's not big either. And a lot of people think it's just tacky beach resorts because it's quite famous for like stag parties. You call them bachelor parties, don't you? And things like that, and the rowdy crowd that go there to get drunk. But it's not just that. It's also got nice tourist resorts. And most importantly, it's got this beautiful mountain range called the Tramontana Mountains. And I've met some friends with, well, unfortunately, some English people. I haven't managed to make any Spanish friends yet. And we go walking about once a week in the mountains when it's not too hot. We'll go swimming or lunch in the summer and walking in the winter.
Now, I bet the food is great, and I know the weather has got to be excellent. How many people live
I honestly don't even know. I know the population like more than doubles in the summer because of everybody coming over from abroad, but I don't know what the total population is. You should have asked me to do some homework.
Well, I usually do a little bit of that ahead of time so that I don't have to ask that silly question. Another thing I saw that you're interested in, and I have no idea, what is this? Is it stand-up paddleboard?
It's relatively new sport. Although if you go to the beach, you'll nearly always see somebody doing it. It's like a massive surfboard and you stand up on it and you've got one paddle that you just push yourself along. So you're typically not on the waves or anything. You're on calm water, either in the sea or a river, ideally.
So you're standing on like a surfboard kind of a thing and you're...
With the paddle. Your feet are on the board, so you're standing upright. And you've got a very long paddle that you're using to push you through the water. And I didn't actually like the idea when I first heard about it. So in 2017, I moved to a new town in England. This is before Mallorca. And I needed to make friends since it was a new place. And all the mums at my daughter's school went paddleboarding once a week. It was an organised group, but a big group from our village went along to it. So I thought, well, I should give it a go because that seems to be the way to make friends. And it was actually really easy. I thought it would really hurt your back or something because you're standing up and pushing yourself along. And it was quite easy compared to something like surfing or windsurfing where there's quite a big learning curve. So I was able to do it straight away. And then I'd go along every week and have a chat. And you can do it quite relaxed and you're talking to people on the next board along, and then we go out for dinner or something. So it was a nice way to meet people.
You mentioned before, and it sort of ties into where you live now, that you guys like to travel and you can be or wish to be digital nomads, except you end up staying for a couple of years or whatever. If you travel, you have to fly to Barcelona, I'm assuming, and then from Barcelona, you can fly anywhere.
Barcelona, often Germany.
Yes.
When I came to Portland for WordCamp US, where I met you, I'd gone via Germany. But yeah, Mallorca has a big airport for Europe, but to go beyond Europe, you need to change somewhere typically.
Where's the best place you've ever gone to, the most beautiful place you've ever gone to, or something that you really liked? Besides Portland,
That's
Oregon.
the worst place. Anyway.
Well, it's not the worst.
I'm not very pleased about them doing it there 2 years in a row, shall we say?
Well, please, I hear you.
Yeah,
I'd rather do
I
it
have to
in my
travel
work.
20 hours to Portland.
WordCamp US. You could see, yes, WordCamp US in Mallorca.
Yeah,
That would make
at
a
least
lot of
it'd be
sense.
nice.
All right, so, but where, it can be anywhere.
The most beautiful places were probably tropical islands. So for my honeymoon, I went to the Seychelles and Mauritius, both islands in the Indian Ocean. And they are a different level of beauty to the Mediterranean, which is beautiful. But the tropicalness, the white sands, the bright turquoise waters, even really nice rocks, like massive rocks on the beach that add to how picturesque it is, and the fruit trees and things. So I think tropical places are probably my favorite, although I haven't been to them very much because they're far away and expensive.
I have not been there, but, I like the Mediterranean stuff. I'm blanking out in Greece. What's the Santorini?
I don't know Greece that well. I did do Athens this year for WordCamp Europe.
Oh, well, Athens.
Yeah, I wasn't overly impressed. Everyone seemed to really like it, but Andy and I weren't actually impressed with Athens. Well, there's a bit in the middle, the ruins of the Acropolis, but the actual city wasn't as historic as I was expecting as a whole.
Let me ask you a totally off-the-wall question. Actually, it's not off the wall. I ask a lot of people this question. What's the first thing you can remember?
The first thing I remember is taking sweets from strangers. So my cousin Robert and I were visiting a maze, I don't know where, probably somewhere near London because they lived that way. And we went ahead, I think I was 3, and a man gave us some sweets, and he gave me a red sweet. I think he gave me a yellow sweet and Robert a red sweet. And then our parents came over and we hadn't eaten them yet. So we put our hands behind our backs and sort of backed away from our parents.
Right.
We must have looked so guilty. And they were like, "What are you hiding?" We did, yeah. And we got in trouble. And they let us eat the sweets, but it kind of had spoiled it by then after the lecture.
I bet you were a really good kid as a little kid, right? I bet you did as you were told, and behaved, and maybe a little bit of a teacher's pet.
Yeah, I was until 13, and then I had a few more rebellious years. But because I was good at school and things, I was able to be rebellious and go out with my friends and get drunk all the time and things and get good grades. So my parents couldn't be too strict because I was getting the grades. So that helped.
So how old were you when you first got drunk?
I think I was about 15.
Yeah, and what was that like? I mean, were you some guys or just girls or what?
My boyfriend's parents went out a lot and everybody would just come to his house. We would normally hang around on the streets, but when they were out, we went to their house and they had an alcohol cabinet. So we would help ourselves.
Yes.
And I haven't enjoyed aniseed flavored alcohol ever since I first got drunk, and that was off-putting.
Now, were you drinking to impress anybody? Because that's sometimes what happens with little kids.
Possibly. I mean, the whole group was a year older. They were in the year above me at school. So I guess maybe I didn't want to seem young, but I didn't feel pressured or anything. It was just having fun.
Well, okay, Katie. Now, we have covered the alcohol part of this. What about
Seriously,
drugs?
Bud? This is going to be published publicly.
That's right. All one of you will be hearing this. No, come on. At least tens of people will be hearing this. So,
one thing that really helped was that I absolutely hate smoking. I tried smoking things and I just hated it so much that I never got into it. And I tried eating it sometimes, but that turned into a different class of drug. And once I had quite a bad trip just on cannabis one time and was like hallucinating and thinking terrible things were going to happen.
Oh.
And I never did anything harder than that. And this is in the 90s.
Well, the problem is always with eating this stuff is that, you eat something and go, oh, nothing happened. And then you start eating more of the stuff. Maybe something still hasn't happened. And all of a sudden, the walls are breathing because you're hallucinating. And it's, I'm a drug-free zone. I don't do any of this stuff anymore because I've aged out. So we've reached that point of the show where I'm going to ask you, who do you recommend that I have on Seriously Bud?
I would recommend Alex Standiford from the Siren Affiliates plugin. And that's because I only actually found out who he was recently, but he's doing great work. He's just making the transition now from having quit his job recently and building a plugin. And he has lots of great ideas. And I think he's going places.
Okay. Well, does he have a good story, like a personal story that you know of?
I don't know all of the details, but I think he'd be a good person to talk to and you'd enjoy meeting him.
Yeah. And, the purpose of the show is also to give people an opportunity to tell their story or a little bit about them that they normally don't get to talk about to the WordPress community. I mean, that is how this whole thing got started. I would go to an event and I'd say, gee, I wish I had spent more time with Katie Keith. I just didn't really get to know her. All of a sudden it was like, okay, I'll do a podcast. And the show was born in like about 2 seconds. The whole idea came to my head. So listen, thank you so much. I have to come to Mallorca for so many reasons. And of course, I came, definitely. I would see you. But you'd probably not want to see me, though. Would you? But we'd have a good time. And I have been to, Barcelona and the coast, north from Barcelona north. I love it. So I'd like to come back.
Well, are you coming to Basel, Switzerland for WordCamp Europe?
I don't know. That's
you could do a bit of a trip around Europe there.
Every minute I can spend in Europe is a minute not spent here, and I'm off for that. Okay, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm more European than American. I just am. I just feel an affinity for being there compared to
do
being.
The Porto thing with Bob.
So
Your friend Bob.
No, I know. Oh, I have a friend, Bob. I don't know any Bob. Okay, thanks again, Katie.
Thanks for
really
having me.
Appreciate this. My pleasure.
I didn't know that Katie met her husband while they were in college, living in the same student hall. Thinks that technical writing is so boring. Worked at a magnetic bracelet company and learned paddleboarding just so that you could make friends. Did you? Now, as always, you can go to SeriouslyBud.com and hear all the past episodes of my show. And until next time, thank you for your time.